Okay, game 4 here, and big player on the board is goons. So what you want to do, build a deck that plays as many goons as possible, and then you buy many things for many points. So can you play many goons? Yes, there's a stack of 10 fortresses on the board, and there's also inheritance, which means if you inherit fortresses, there's an additional stack of 8 fortresses on the opposite end of the board there. So are there is an abundance of plus actions. You don't have to worry about that. Now there are two ways to go about playing this big goons deck. One is you could play with minions. So for example, you can play fortress goons, minion discard, fortress goons, minion discard. Get lots of goons and play that way. Or you can go with the library. So you can play a bunch of fortresses, then a bunch of goons to reduce your hand size, then play library to restore it to 7, and so on. So these are the two ways you can go about playing this big goons deck. At the start of the game I was considering which is better, the library or the minion way. Either way, you want altar in your deck because altar can both trash, which gets you thinner, and pick up important cards like minion, like library, or whatever you want. It can pick up fortresses if you need that, dungeons, lighthouses, courtyards, whatever you like. There's also a fortress courtyard draw engine as well, but that doesn't seem as potent as the minion drawing through your deck in a sense, or the library. So here the aim of the early game is to get to 6 to buy an altar before goons, before minion. And because of the altar, I prefer doing it the minion way. Minion can, if you have excess minions, there will be 2 coins, which is money. So it's decent, and it also attacks your opponent, so it might be worth it. It might be a little bit better than the library route, though you should not forget library. So I open silver, a little bit non-committal there, and then go for courtyard. So courtyard silver, we both open. I think the best way to hit 6 on this board as quickly as possible is through that. I have 7 but stick a copper back, wanting only the altar. It is way too early for inheritance. My opponent on 3 here picks up a second courtyard. I on 3 here, instead of a second courtyard, I go for a dungeon. Now I quite like dungeon in this game. It may not be the best game for dungeon. It is not the best game for dungeon, but I quite like it, even though there are discard attacks around. So here my opponent has 7, picks up their altar. The reason I like dungeon is because it can get me to my altar more quickly, and it can help fix up my hand, even though it's a 3 card or 4 card hand. So that's why I like the dungeon. I pick up a fortress here. I will want the actions soon, maybe? Not sure. I didn't want silver for sure. It's an unnecessary stop card in this deck. I will be able to get to 6 soon enough. In fact, I've already gotten to 6. So here my opponent plays their courtyard followed by an altar, so they get their altar out before me. Their hovel is trashed and replaced with a minion. And on 2 here my opponent will pick up a lighthouse. So here I get to play my dungeon. I'm thrilled about this. I get to play a dungeon, and then I can decide what to keep, what to discard, how to play this altar. So on second thought here, I probably should not have triggered this shuffle. I should have just maybe kept a copper and trashed it to altar, picking up a minion, and let the reshuffle happen. But instead I triggered the reshuffle, which isn't great, to be honest. It's only after I triggered it I realized, wait, I should not have triggered this. The dungeon will help, but it won't. It shouldn't have to be this way, where I have to rely on dungeon to get me out of a sticky situation. And with the money I have, I pick up another fortress. So my opponent plays a courtyard here and spends a bit of time thinking. I can only imagine that they perhaps drew into a bit of action cards. Maybe the minion and the altar was drawn, plus the other courtyard. Not too sure what my opponent drew into here. On my turn, I know a fortress is one of the remaining 2 cards, so I may be able to have a decent turn if that fortress can turn over something nice. 7 my opponent has. They can go for goons. maybe, actually, I don't know if I would have gone for goons in their position, but they end up picking up a minion. So I get rid of the hovel here and a copper. This fortress luckily turns up a courtyard, and another trick you can perform is that you can use altar to trash fortresses to get whatever you like once you've cleared the junk from your deck, that is. So that is why I have a bit of fortresses at this point as well, although maybe this third one is a bit excessive. I managed to get a altar trash into minion there, picking up another fortress. So here my opponent trashes the overgrown estate, gets a minion with it, and the first minion attack of the game, I believe, but I don't mind because I have a good hand. My opponent puts down their lighthouse, and with 5 will pick up another minion, presumably. There is some thought here to get in a second altar, actually. I thought about it, but I didn't seem to find time to be able to pick up that second altar. Because especially with the fortresses around, they will be good. You can get duchies or whatever you need very quickly and very easily. So here, I have a bit of a turn, discarding once with that minion, finding my courtyard, putting my dungeon in play. I could get 6 here for goons, but I decide to wait on that for a bit and instead just go for a double minion turn here. So I'm not sure how many minions I have, but the minion split isn't that big a deal in this game, I don't think. You want some, probably, just so that your opponent doesn't have all. But like I said, there is the library idea to get through your deck and play all the goons that you want to play. So that's why the minion split isn't such a big deal, I think. So my opponent discards with their minion there, getting rid of a good hand from me, but I still managed to have a good 4 card hand here. My opponent gets rid of a courtyard there and gets a minion buying a fortress. Presumably getting rid of the courtyard to have enough money to buy the fortress there. So they finally have a fortress. I have 3 of them. Don't know why, I have 1 terminal in my deck. But here, courtyard comes out, then a couple minions, 1 for coins, and I'm going to take this one for coins too, not wanting to trigger that reshuffle. And on 7, get the goons. So, looking in decent position here. Wasn't too worried again about losing the minion split, so it's quite content to buy that goons there. Here my opponent swings my hand away with the minion, courtyard followed by minion, and altar picks up the last minion. So I think I lost the minion split 6-4 here, not entirely sure, and another lighthouse for my opponent. Here you notice I don't have any lighthouses, and the reason is, well, I don't care. I think I can recover from the attacks, whatever they may be, and part of that is the dungeon. The dungeon can help me. If minion gives me a bad hand, maybe the dungeon can fix it up a bit. So here, with this courtyard, I stick back the necropolis. I think it is at least somewhat useful as a source of plus actions, and not going to discard with this minion here at the end of a shuffle, just going to take the money, and I have 2 buys. So I come up with 9, I believe, which I decide on a goons and a dungeon here. So I'm hoping maybe to have a dungeon in play at the start of every turn now that I have 2 in my deck. We'll see. I can pick up a lighthouse here, but I really didn't feel the need to pick up a lighthouse this game. It is money, it is good, it defends you from attacks, I know, but I didn't pick up one. Maybe I should have picked up 1 here after seeing this hand, but at least there's a minion, so I can discard this to get something better. My opponent plays a lighthouse, discards with minion, courtyard comes out, another minion. Here on 6, I believe my opponent will now pick up a goons. Yes, so I have 2 goons. My opponent now has the 1, and this is a bad hand for me. I pick up a fortress here, so maybe the lighthouse was good, or necessary at that point rather. So here my opponent plays their lighthouse, so I'm probably never going to be able to land an attack against them from here on out. and it's just a bunch of, discarding through your deck trying to find the altar and the goon. So I noticed here that my opponent triggered quite a bad reshuffle and wasn't able to go anymore into their deck. So if I can avoid it, I'll try to not discard with Minion on this turn because I expect their turn to be bad. However, I have to discard here, so it is what it is. It's fine, it's not a big deal. My opponent on their last turn bought inheritance on the fortresses. So it's a good cheap target for goons, so you can get lots of goons points that way. I get rid of this necropolis. It is no longer needed because I have a pile of fortresses in my deck, and I get 2 more here with that altar. Minion attacks me, but I have a decent hand. Get rid of the I get rid of the altar here. I don't need it, and I may see a fortress, so I can play this courtyard. But it doesn't matter. Once I have a minion to discard and get 4 new cards, I feel relatively safe. So here on 8 and 2 buys, my opponent buys an estate and a goons. So they have 2 goons now, and the estate for them is now a fortress. So here I get another dungeon in play. I managed to land 2 goons down, so that's excellent for me. This is a bit of a strange play for me here. I probably should have bought just a 3rd goons, but I found that somehow triple estate was more appealing to me. I'm not really sure why, but I think the 3rd goons was a better play there. So here my opponent doesn't show me a minion right away. Instead, courtyard comes up followed by a goon, so I can only presume now the minion will come out. Yeah, there it is. But the goons before the minion means that I can keep good cards in my hand without having to worry about them being discarded. Altar for my opponent gives them a duchy here. And they pick up another goons and a courtyard, I believe. So here, I trash this estate into a library, and you'll see how much work this library does now. Luckily, see it on the reshuffle immediately, and minion, goons first, then minion, then draw 6 cards. So this is excellent for me here. I just put all these action cards into my deck, play this dungeon, get rid of the coppers, and just trying to not trigger a reshuffle at this point. So another goons for me here. This is my 3rd goons, I believe. So I know my opponent has what, 4 buys and a gain, so they can't end the game with the 4 estates and the fortress. So with that in mind, well, the goons is obvious. I want more buys and more points, but with that ability of my opponent to end the game in mind, I pick up a province here, and hopefully the gap is wide enough to prevent that end game. I get rid of the courtyard there because I want to make this library draw as many cards as possible. So here my opponent picks up a dungeon and a goons, getting some goons points. Here, this library is going to draw 6 cards, immense draw, putting in such good work in the last 2 turns of the game here. So here, altar gets me the last fortress. I'm going for the end of the game here. I feel like I can do it, especially after seeing my library. 1 more goons I need, and the minion doesn't find it. Will the dungeon find it? Yes, it does. So that is the end of game 4. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.